here we are doing another Beanie video. There was a article that got released a few weeks ago that I wanted to talk about because it was as stupid as most of the other articles that we've talked about before. This one I wanted to actually do this a little bit differently though, because I can only kind of repeat the same things myself over and over, and it eventually stops being meaningful. So I actually have an expert with me today. Then we're going to be going through this and kind of get a different perspective on it. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Karen Boeker. I've been involved with Beanies since I got my first one in 1994. Went on, I became friends with Becky Estensoro of True Blue Beans, and I ran the counterfeit alerts board for her for several years. Uh, I have helped with many books. Um, I've published many articles. I've been around forever. So, what are we going to go over today?
Well, there was a you've already seen it, but
Yes.
there's an article from Mental Floss, and this is the same website that has one of the many clickbait lists, the like top 10 rarest beanies you might have, where it's always the same exact stuff over and over, and like, oh, here's Princess worth $30,000, all that kind of stupid stuff. Same website, but new article, and it's expert tips for making money off your collection, and they have they have an expert for their source here, and it's our good friend Dr. Lori.
Right.
So we're going to be talking about that, but before we do that, coincidentally, the day after that article was published, there was a new video on YouTube that I found, and I'm going to go ahead and send you the link here. This is going to be very boisterous. I'm just warning you ahead of time. I've seen a few videos from this guy. This is Chadtronic. He usually does reviews of like weird movies and just. I mean, he kind of does a lot of different stuff, but like a
I
few
saw part of this and turned it off.
um, a few
Oh,
years
okay. Yeah,
ago.
somebody sent me this and I saw it and I turned it off.
Okay. Yeah, a few years ago, he did a video talking about how at the end of 1999 they retired all beanies and then brought them back a few months later. He called it a scam, basically. But it's weird because I kind of got the vibe from that video that he's just sort of making fun of the subject, he basically called Beanie Babies. He said they were like Pokemon for old people, where
Right.
it's just like something to like you waste your money on these things and they're not worth anything. But judging from this video, he actually seems to have kind of gotten like sees them as almost like a guilty pleasure. And so the first 3 minutes of this is explaining a very common problem that people have who are new to the hobby, where they just don't understand the range of prices on eBay. So I kind of wanted you to watch that and then share your thoughts on it.
Okay.
I still am kind of fascinated with Beanie Babies, and I still don't understand them. And when I say I don't understand them, I mean like I don't understand the market for them. The modern day market for Beanie Babies makes no sense. And I have here an example. Here is Millennium. This is a special Beanie Baby made for the year 2000, hence the name Millennium. This is where it gets interesting. And this is not about something that happened in the 90s. This is about something that's still happening today. I don't understand the market for these things today. And here's why. So we got two identical Beanie Babies, but there is one important difference between these two. Here on this one, on the inside tag, you can see its name is Millennium, spelled correctly. And then you have this one, which has the name Millennium, but it's spelled wrong with only one N. It's probably your first thought, and mine, that the misspelled Beanie Baby is probably worth a pretty penny. You would think. Or maybe not. You would probably maybe think that these just aren't worth any more, period. And that's correct, but also incorrect. And this is where it gets really weird. I don't understand the value of these things. These are recent sales that have happened on eBay in just the last couple months. The misspelled Millennium Beanie Baby has sold for like $9, but it's also sold for like $500. What is the deal? Why is this one exact same item going for either a couple bucks or hundreds? It makes no sense. I don't understand this. Am I rich or not?
Okay, you want to go over this real quick?
Sure. So yeah,
Millennium.
you can explain this a lot better than I can, but the thing I wanted to point out is I'm actually pleasantly surprised that he is kind of looking at this in a smart way almost, because so many people will go on eBay and they'll see the same exact thing sell for $5, $10, etc., like 100 times, and then like one or two sales that are way higher, and they'll just completely disregard all the low ones. This is rare. That's the end of the subject.
I
He's
think
at
it's human
least
nature.
he's at least saying like something's weird about this, and so
Right.
um
Right. It's
it's
it's it's fake sales.
yeah.
I don't know how to say it any other way. What you have is you have people who just want to continue the clickbait rumors, and they list an item. Normally they have very low feedback. The people who purchase them have very low feedback, and they never pay. They're sales that we can never ever ever get verified, and then you'll see them relisted. There's also the issue of money laundering. I can't get into that because I don't understand it. But
Yeah, it's
that's how this all started years ago. Was alleged money laundering, um, and it's not just our hobby, but it's these fake sales, and then you have the vigilante bidders, buyers, whatever you want to call them. They come in, and if a seller doesn't have a, a instant payment required, then you can go in there and you can buy something and they never pay. And what they do is they try to get the seller hurt by having them have to pay the seller fees. And on $2,000, $3,000, that's quite a bit of money. Um,
right. And so I think the important thing to realize here is that when you're looking on eBay, there's two different ways you can look at prices. You can either look at what
yes,
people are asking for, which never means anything because, as we all
that
know,
doesn't mean anything, right?
there's the people who put up the piece of toast with Virgin Mary burnt into it for millions of
Right.
dollars, that kind of stuff. You could put up a dirty sock, ask for $1,000. It's like you have those, and then you have the sold sales, but eBay does a really bad job at displaying those because it shows things that look like they've sold even if they haven't, which is what you were
Correct.
describing.
Correct. There's also the best offer, and you
Right.
can override that instant payment required if you know this as a buyer, by going in, offering a seller a certain amount, and it will show sold, and then they never pay. So it's the same type deal. That's how they bypass the instant payment required.
And then the other thing with the best offer, correct me if I'm wrong, can't you do a thing where, like, let's say you have the Millennium listed for $500 or best offer, somebody gives an offer of $15 and buys it legitimately, they get their money, it's still going to show 500 with, like, the cross through it?
That's right. That's something you and I've talked about before, because I think we call him the green background guy.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
that guy.
yeah, that guy. He has stuff listed at, I can't remember what it is. Is it the Toys for Tots Valentino
I
or
mean, he's got
special?
tons of them. I remember seeing a very wrinkled Gen 3 Twigs that he was trying to sell for about 2,500 or something. Like, just claiming some stupid thing about it, and I think even that was like, this is a 50% sale off of what it used to be, and just like, ugh.
Right. And I remember on that Toys for Tots Valentino, when we went in and we looked, he had it listed at like $2,500 or $10,000 or something ridiculous. And when we saw how much it had actually sold for, it was like $12.
Yeah,
It was,
and eBay will only show what the original listed price was, not what the
that's
person
right.
paid.
It's when you have a multi-quantity listing, that it's a workaround.
Oh yeah, that one too, because that's right. Can't you, like, if you have 10 of the same thing, you can sell 9 of them for $5, and then like crank the price of the last one up really high, and it'll say that the first 9 sold for that high price.
Yeah, and it used to be that sellers used that as a placeholder, because anybody with a normal brain knows you're not going to go pay $20,000 for an item that you can normally get for five.
Yeah.
Um, but then these people who do the scam articles, they they started seeing these high prices, and that's how it originated. We think, because it's all relatively new. none of these beanies were, expensive back in 2010. It started,
Yeah.
yeah,
There's some of them that just make no sense. Like Princess never was worth as much as people say it is, but at least it has like a legacy behind it.
it did, but they
And
did
then
sell. Back when when Princess first came out, there were sales of like 1,000. Now there are no sales of 500,000, but there were sales of 1,000.
and that's just people who believed that it was a super rare
And
item and
charity, and
oh yeah.
charity,
Well, secondhand that money wouldn't go to charity, right?
right?
So, but it's like you have
But we're
that one,
talking
but
about when it
then
was first released too. We're not talking 20 years later.
right.
When there's millions of them out there.
And then you said you said it was about 2014 that the clickbait started happening, right?
That's when we really started noticing it. Yeah.
Because I fell out of the hobby after 1999 and didn't get back into it until about 3-4 years ago. So I kind of missed the start of that. But when I started looking at the sites online, I'm just like, why are people saying Claude is rare? That one was never anything special. And it's every source you look at, it's always in the top 10 rarest, and they never have a good reason why. It's,
Never. And it's not just our hobby. It's Disney Black Diamond VHS tapes.
yeah, I've seen those.
It's Barbie. And we know there are rare Barbies, but it's just like beanies. There are rare beanies. It's just not the ones that they talk about.
Right. But yeah, it's like the whole thing is just a bunch of one
Clickbait.
person says something stupid and everybody parrots it. All it
Hmm.
takes is like I always use Claude as the example because it's the one you see most often, but you could just pick any random common beanie and if one person puts it on eBay asking for $500,000 and the wrong person looks at that and thinks it's legit, then that ends up in an article and then a different article copies that article and it keeps going and then people see these, they think that's real, so then they put theirs up on eBay for that price, and it just keeps feeding itself.
It
And
does, and it's hard. I understand, it's human nature to want to think that your item is worth a lot of money, especially with everything going on in the world right now. People are out of jobs. They need the money. And the people writing these articles, they're doing nothing but hurting other people. And the people reading the articles, they don't know who to believe because then they come to us and they're like, what the heck are you talking about? This is what this says. And those websites, your Cosmopolitan and your Mental Floss and all that, they have way better SEO and tech people than what, three women, running a
explain what
Facebook
SEO is for people.
search engine optimization.
It's
How you
basically
get your
just
stuff
yeah,
sold.
when you type into Google or any search engine, it's like the things it looks at to find your page.
Right. And
So
if you have thousands upon thousands of people going to visit those sites, they're going to get more traffic than us because they're going to rank higher on sites like Google.
right,
Um, and there are still some legit sites out there giving great information and valid information,
they're
and
just buried. Yeah,
we're buried.
that's
Yeah,
the
we're
thing because
buried.
like I said, just again going with Claude as the example because it's easy. Like if you look that one up on Google, like every result you get is going to be an article saying it's one of the rarest ever made. They never give a reason why, but they always say it's worth this much. It's so hard to find, blah blah blah. And then when you post about it in the Facebook group or in like my Reddit thread, like my Reddit group or anything,
Hmm.
it will basically be like, no, it's $5, and we're the only one saying that. So of course people are going to get defensive. Like, no, it's not. I read all these other
Absolutely.
places, but it's just the other thing, and I always say is the people who think that these are worth so much money don't seem to understand that even if that was true, some other human being has to be paying their money if the first person's trying to sell it to them. They're not just generating money from a fairy princess. So like especially like you said, if like people are losing their jobs desperate for money, who's going to drop $10,000 on this beanie to help out this other person? Like that
And
it's
it's
just
where they come up with the amount of money that say Claude is worth. It's mind-boggling. The rarest beanie right now is Chef Robuchon, or the most expensive beanie is
right.
Chef Robuchon. And the last one sold a little over a year ago for right around $6,500. And it wasn't even complete. So, that's your
Right,
most
because that comes
expensive.
with like a letter, right?
The original comes in a pretty little case with a ribbon wrapped around it. but you also had the foodie groups, foodie collectors, who were trying to get it because there's only like 200 that were done, and they say that it's around 20 that actually made it into the beanie hobby. And you know, you're talking 20 million Claudes versus 20 Chef
Yeah, it's like you
Robuchons.
have 20 of this one particular bear. A lot of people don't know it exists.
Right.
Like, the people who do have it aren't going to give it up easily. Like, it
Mm-mm.
makes sense for that one to be expensive, but
Right.
when there's one that you can go to a thrift store and find one, or like you have these hundreds of people posting every day, I found this rare one in my attic. Like, you can tell it's not rare just from how often it's getting shown.
I love thrifting, and I can tell you that literally every single time I go to a thrift store, I find Millennium. I find the bunnies, the floppity
Yeah,
hippity hoppity. I find Claude. I find Valentino. And we could talk about this too. There is a harder to find second gen Valentino and
right.
third gen. And those used to go for a lot more than what they do now, but they still go, 500 bucks unless it's a one of those rare tags, and most people are not going to have those super duper rare tags.
Like
But for
the second gen UK, or like, what do you mean?
right, right, or the third gen German tag or something, there people are not going to have that. Um, and just because it says Deutschland on the fourth gen swing tag
Oh yeah.
does not make it a German swing tag. That's just an address for Thai.
And we're going to talk about generations probably in a minute here, because
Okay.
that's another thing that people just, it's such a simple concept that it never gets covered in these kinds of articles. But yeah, it's like, I went to a thrift store not too long ago. I always dig through the stuffed animal section just to see if I find anything interesting, and
Hmm.
I find a Valentino, and I'm showing it to my friend. I'm like, look, it has a brown nose. And that's another one I don't get. I have no idea how that rumor started.
You know what? I know when you had brought up
The
the thing
MC
about
beanie.
the Mastercard bear.
Yeah.
It's got to be from something like that.
It's like the princess thing, because on princess, PVC pellets make it more valuable, but then it doesn't apply to anything else, but
Right.
someone latches onto that, and it's like, oh, PVC is better, that must mean all of them are that way. It's like, no. Let me go ahead and link you to the article here, and we'll kind of just go through this bit by bit. So we're probably going to have stuff to ramble about for pretty much every paragraph of this. So I'll let you kind of take control. When you see something that you object to, just speak up, and if I see anything that you didn't mention, I'll mention it.
You know,
Are you objecting to the Dr. Lori with an expertise in Beanie Babies?
yes.
Okay, yeah,
She is,
share your words on Dr. Lori here.
here. Okay. First of all, nobody in the hobby had ever heard of Dr. Lori until I guess it was about what 2018 when she did some article with Business Insider.
Yeah,
And eventually, Business Insider took down that story because they contacted Becky Estensor of True Blue Beans and found out that all the information was false. So their expert wasn't an expert. Dr. Lori is very good with what she does. She is a doctor. She's a very educated woman.
well, doctorate in art history, right? It's not
I
actually
believe
any.
so.
I,
I
I
believe
think it's
so.
something that doesn't necessarily translate
To
to.
Beanie Babies.
Yeah,
I think that this is beneath her. I think what she's doing is beneath her. I really do. I think that she's very smart, but she's not an expert on beanies. And like I said, nobody who we're all like, who the heck is this woman? I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say anything bad about her because, like I said, she's obviously a very educated woman who does know her stuff in something that I don't know anything about. I don't know anything about antiques and art and things.
yeah, and that's the thing, is it seems like the kinds of things that she would normally talk about are much broader subjects that it would be
Yes.
harder to learn about, because you have to know so many little ins and outs of just like what's going on with different, like, I remember watching this one video where she's just at a thrift store and is talking about how, like, oh, this plate came from Japan from this year, and because this was going on at that point, like, this is actually pretty hard to come by. Like, you have to know so many different things to apply to it.
Right.
Beanies are relatively simple, but she
Right.
just does not get them.
No.
And so this entire article is using her as pretty much the primary source, and we'll be seeing all these things being spouted that are just not true at all.
Right. I would like to know what errors they're talking about that could increase your doll's value. It's not a doll, it's a Beanie Baby. It's a plush toy. It's not a doll.
I guess doll is sort of whatever,
Eh.
but yeah, like
I collect dolls too, so I don't like that. It's not a
I
doll.
usually just call them stuffed animals, but yeah,
It's
either
or
way.
plush. I hear plush. I hear plushies, bean bags. Like we've talked about before, the PVC versus PE pellet things. It
It
doesn't matter
it
except on
no, it
Princess.
never has. So
And yeah,
say
I mean
let's
the earlier
focus.
ones do come with PVC. Your actual rare first, second, third gens are always going to be PVC.
Right,
Um,
and
so
that's the weird thing is like, I find it so weird that people latch onto the PVC because it's such a minor detail,
collectors don't
and
care.
I've tried to think of a good example to compare it to, and I could never come up with one because when people say, "Oh, I have a chocolate with PVC pellets," that's basically like saying I have a coin and it's silver. It's like, okay, is it a quarter, a nickel, or a dime? Like, you're not telling me the important info here.
I get what you
'Cause,
mean,
yeah,
and you're
it's
not.
and so like for right now we're just gonna focus on this number one entry on here. I'd like to point out here it talks about the hang tag and the tush tag.
Yeah.
It does not mention generations, and they never do anywhere else in the article. And
Mm-mm.
that I would say that is the number one thing that you should learn as a collector because when you're talking about anything Gen 6 or later, most things only have one possible tag gen, and a lot of them, like you'd say that like most of the 6 through 19, like there's not any particular generations that are like as a whole worth more than others, right?
Yes and no. I know that the ones that were released in 2009, I forget which generation those are. When we were doing the price guide, we keep seeing that generation seems to have, or the 2009 releases seem to be worth a little bit more, but I'm not talking, hundreds of dollars. I'm talking instead of it being $5 to $10, they're them being $20 to $50.
Okay.
So there's some, we don't know why. You know,
I
as
I
I'm
certainly
sure
couldn't
it's
tell you.
supply and demand. It's probably a year that they didn't produce as many.
Maybe. But yeah, it's like when you're talking about the later ones, you don't necessarily need to say like, "Oh, this is a Gen 12," because it probably doesn't come with any other tag, and that's meaningless to a lot of people. But
Right.
when you're talking about I always consider the first five generations sort of like the originals. Technically it's only Gen 1 is original, but like
Right.
it was the first run when it kind of had like its big fad period, and then everything retired and then came back. But it's like there's such a massive difference between a Gen 1 and a Gen 5, and there's no mention of it here. And so we'll get more into that when it talks about the original 9 later down the list, but it's not that hard to tell the difference.
It's not.
4 and 5 are really similar, but those also have very little difference in value. So telling a 1 from a 2 from a 3 from a 4 is really basic stuff. I learned that from the Mary Beth Beanie World magazine when I was 8. So it's like it's not a hard concept.
You know, somebody posted in our group about a chocolate, and everybody started saying, "Oh, I've got this one. Oh,
Yeah.
I've got this one. Oh, I've got this one." No, you don't. It was a rare chocho lit tush tag, and it made me go write down every single version of chocolate
I saw that.
that is out there, and there are 23 different versions of chocolate, and that
It
was just off the top of my
Yeah,
head,
at
and probably
least because like I don't even know if you included all the different like the address combinations.
I didn't.
So yeah.
I didn't. So I came up with 23 different versions of chocolate, and only a couple of those are actually you know
Yeah.
worth some serious money. Or I to me, if paying $1,000 for a uh, Beanie Baby, that's a lot of money to me. Um,
For me, even $20 is a lot of money.
see, yeah,
So
yeah. So I don't know, and the fourth and fifth gens that they show the pictures of in all these articles, those are not your rare versions.
right.
But you could get into the errors on some stuff, and
And
when we
and
talk errors,
Chocholit does count as an error, but
chocholit, we call it
an
uh,
oddity, right?
an oddity. Um, and the errors that they point out are not errors. Well, they are, but they were made in the millions, so they're
Yeah.
not worth anymore.
I mean, most of them aren't even errors anyway. It's usually
Right,
something like there's a space before the exclamation point. Like,
right,
that's just a formatting thing. Like,
right.
so it's. Would you say error has become kind of a dirty word in the community now?
Yes,
Because I hate it. Like,
we all do. Somebody actually accused us one time of not allowing the word error in our group. And that's not the case, but I think it's because by the time you've heard error 100 times in a day,
it's meaningless.
you just don't even want to read anymore.
It's especially bad when people just say, they'll be like, Valentino with errors, and then that's it. They don't say what they're even pointing out. It's
Right.
like, okay, I guess I'll take your word for it. Because,
Yeah, and if they would
like,
just search, there's a lot of different groups on Facebook, and we all pretty much say the same thing. Um, if they would just search the group, they would see that the same question has been asked, what, 1,000 times over the past year, and that's not including the people whose posts we delete or don't approve, and
yeah.
that's not including the same questions being asked via emails and private messages. But if they would just search, I mean, if you've got 1,000 people asking about the same thing, is it really rare? And that's what makes the collectors in our group upset. And I think that the sellers need to realize that they may get frustrated, but if they want to sell this stuff, they need to be nicer to the buyers, and they need to not come off as know-it-alls against people who've been in the hobby for 20, 25 years, which a lot of the people in our group have that level of experience. And well, we read it on Mental Floss or Cosmo or whatever clickbait article it was. Just because you read an article doesn't mean you're an expert.
I used to work in this exact pizzeria. And for your information, lady, this was not just used to paddle my butt. It was also used to move pizzas and crush rats.
I don't know where you get your facts, sir, but I am a volunteer housewife with 45 minutes of orientation and a Harlequin romance about archaeologists.
Don't wave your fancy degrees at me.
Exactly. I mean, I've not been in the hobby that long, and like week or two ago, I was telling somebody, they were talking about hope, I think it was, and I said it's common, $5, and they're like, you need to do your research. I can
Right.
link you to a page. I'm like, no, please don't do that. Like, don't act like you know more than me. Like,
Right. And you do. When it comes to those fourth and fifth gens, you know them like the back of your hand. So,
those are the easy ones. I don't know much at from 6 onwards because there's like 5 million of them, but
yeah. Well, that's another thing. People come on and they say, we've got all of them. No, you
yeah.
don't.
Oh yeah, like just say which beanie you want. Chances are I'll have it. Like, oh,
Yep.
you have all 3,000 of them there? Okay.
Yeah, there's over 3,100 now, and there were just some new releases, so we need to add those. But and that's not even including every version, because like I
Right.
said, on just chocolate, that's one beanie. There's 23 plus different versions.
By my count, Gen 1 through 5 has 218 unique beanies, but that's not counting versions on any of them. So that's one
Right,
version of Patty, one version of Iggy.
right. I'm sitting here reading that number two about Beanie Baby errors don't always make it valuable. And the first thing I see, and of course it's at the bottom, is some Valentino bears had up to four manufacturing errors,
And
including brown noses instead of black ones,
of
and
course,
tag typos. And that placed them among the most sought after Beanie Babies today. Uh, every
in a different in
Valentino
a
should have a brown nose. If it has a black nose, then you might have something that maybe an oddity collector might buy.
but you said you've never found one with a black one, right?
No, there was one that was supposedly photographed and put in the group, but she never sent it in for authentication. So we don't know. When you take a picture of a Valentino, you can make it look black. You can make that nose look black,
Yeah.
and it, it would have to be verified. And if it showed up, that would be totally cool. There would be somebody who would want it.
I'm sure there'd be someone out there because like the
Sure,
oddities like that, I can't personally imagine dropping a bunch of money on something like that.
it
Even
wouldn't
if
be worth a
like,
ton.
like even if it's something cool like a princess with no rose, like I know those sell for a lot, but I'm more about kind of filling out a checklist, and if I start adding oddities to that, it's never going to end. So
I
it's
hear ya.
you have to find a specific person who really finds that kind of stuff cool.
You do, and the oddity market's shrinking. Valentino without the heart, now that would make it, an oddity, and that would make it worth a little bit more. If it's a second gen Valentino,
Oh yeah, definitely.
yeah, it's worth more. If it's a third gen, it's worth more.
Yeah,
But
Gen
when you
2
have,
is, I mean, Gen 3 is like 50 to 90, right?
yeah, it depends on whether it has a first or second gen tush tag.
Yeah.
First gen tush tag seems to go more than a second gen tush tag. It's more desirable. Um, but you get into your fourth and fifth gens, and I mean, unless it has like a blank tag or something like that, and then you're going into the that small oddity market again.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of collectors for that stuff. Um,
So let's differentiate between a an eBay error and an actual error or an oddity,
okay,
because like there's a fine line there, and it can be kind of hard for people to understand where that is. So
right,
the way that I usually explain it is, if you're talking about grammatical errors or spacing or like punctuation being missing, then you're basically nitpicking and it doesn't even
right,
count as an error anyway.
right,
And then you get stuff where it's like the Squealer poem, "Heel will make you smile,"
right,
or Garcia, "The Beanies used to" instead of "used to."
right,
Like, and those are errors, but they're also common ones.
right.
And so, the difference between something like that and, again, like the chocolate spelling moose as Arnoose, or
The
snort that says
MOCSE.
yeah,
Yeah,
or snort that says "although Tabasco is not so tall."
right.
Those are rarer, and you wouldn't know that just from looking at it. You kind of have to look it up a bit.
Right.
And
And
so
they never touch on that. It's always this weird stuff that, we just don't consider to be worth any additional money. Um, the stuff that actually is, they don't even talk about.
right, I mean, you see that, like, I've looked up Valentinos on eBay that's claimed they have 17 errors, and it's always like, it'll be the punctuation and the spacing that I mentioned, and then it'll be like, it has a TM and a circled R on the tag. Like,
Well,
oh, is that an error? Like,
I
what?
pulled up just now. I pulled up Valentino error on eBay, and that's not including Etsy and some of those other sites. And there's 1,912 with Valentino error in the title.
Definitely
And
a rare item.
yeah, so oh gee, it's so rare. And that's just on one day. And then you look at solds, 91. What percentage of that? I mean,
I'm
I,
surprised that many sold. My explanation that I usually give for the why you see this stuff so often is basically people just become desperate. They have something that they know, or like either they truly know it, or they suspect deep down that they have something that's not worth more than $5 or $10, and so they just go over the thing with a microscope and point out anything that is even slightly off, and they hope that one of those things is going to matter. So number three, smell is just as important as appearance. So I mean, this is basically just saying
let me go over here.
if something is covered in mold or has been dropped in the toilet, then it's
Well,
not worth as
smoke.
much. Like,
Smoke is a huge thing.
yeah,
Um, Collectors, I'm sure they still go ballistic over smoke smell. And that was a problem back in the day when more people smoked. So that is a big thing. But if you have a rare beanie and you're going to buy it, people should disclose that it has whether it comes from pet friendly, um, smoke free. They really should disclose all that. Uh, but they would still buy a rare beanie if it had a weird odor
yeah. I mean, as
because
long
it's
as it looks okay.
yeah, if it looks okay.
So, my nerdy self here is actually finding a point of interest in this photo above the smell thing, because judging from the beanies on the shelf here, assuming that these are all like, that this isn't like a secondhand place, this is like a store that actually got them all in. I'm seeing January 1st 99 releases like
Hmm.
Goatee, and also Quackers, which retired in May of 98. So those early Gen 5 retirees really stuck around for a while. They did not disappear from shelves very quickly.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Because that's always something I kind of I can't help but roll my eyes whenever somebody puts up any beanie, no matter what it is, and they list it as retired. It's like, yeah, it is, because it's 20 years old. That doesn't mean anything. It's the early retired dates for the like 96 and earlier, like those actually mean something. The like seaweed retiring in September of 1998, not so much, because there were millions of those made.
Those are some of the beanies that I didn't like very much that came out. Some of the fifth gens were some of the ones I just didn't like.
The later fifth gens like go to.
Yeah, yeah.
I kind of liked the simplicity of the earlier ones. I'd say around the time, I'd say Gobbles was the first really elaborate one, and then kind of after that they started getting more and more complex. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I did like the simpler ones.
I did too.
One of my favorites is Legs, and it's like the simplest, just kind of like it looks like the thing's been hit by a steamroller. Like,
Well, mine is Patty, and I just liked it because of all the different colors that it came in.
I always found the ones like Radar or Sting to be kind of lame, just because so much of them don't even have beans in it. It's just like little
I
floppy
know.
bits of fabric.
And that's actually a complaint from some of the ones that are coming out today is the lack of beans in them. So
So, we moving on to part 4, or are you
let's go to
checking
part
them?
4. Let's see. Okay. The original 9, she's got them right. It's just that
Yeah,
they only come with a first gen swing tag and a 4-line Korea tush tag. Those are your OG beanies. Collectors, they pay more for those original 9.
oh, okay.
So, yeah, they do. It's not a lot, but they do.
I mean, there is if we're actually talking about Gen 1, I can see that. Like, let's even talk about Gen 2, because those are still worth a lot. Within
Right.
that context, would there be any major difference between a Legs or, I don't
Well,
know, like,
what I think what you're getting at is, and maybe I'm wrong. This is starting to get into the tag generations and what they mean, because a fifth gen chocolate is not going to be worth what a first gen chocolate is worth.
right?
So, mentioning that I mean, if you want to call it original 9, it's the fourth the fourth and fifth gens that everybody says are original 9. Um, they are in name, but they aren't by collector's definition.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to basically get across is, like, if we're using a more extreme example, a Gen 5 Squealer is an original 9 technically, but
Right.
it's also a Gen 5 and isn't worth anything.
Right.
So,
You get into your
like,
tag generations.
and so my question is, and I'm not expecting you to actually throw out any kind of real figure here that can be taken seriously. This is just an estimation.
Okay.
But let's imagine that of any of these beanies, we'll use chocolate as the example, there were only 1,000 ever made from the beginning in 93 all the way up until it retired at the end of 98. Only 1,000. How many of those would fit into a Gen 1 or 2 or etc., like, relatively?
Like percentages.
Yeah.
Um,
Because I would guess
oh,
probably like maybe half of a percent would be Gen 1.
yeah, yeah, you'd have probably like 0.5% would be Gen 1, maybe, say 1.5% Gen 2, and then maybe like say 5% Gen 3, and then like say, I don't know, 20% Gen 4, and then the rest Gen
30,
5.
40 maybe, yeah. Because it's
Yeah.
like, cause it's so hard to say, because like even 5% Gen 3, that would be saying 1 out of every 20 would have that. And that seems pretty high.
And that
It's
is, you're right when you think about it that way.
because,
There
like,
are, people don't really, by the time, Gen 4 came out, that's when beanies were starting to take off, I guess. Because Gen 3, people still really weren't collecting across the country.
right.
You had little pockets. It was huge, like in Illinois in the Great Lakes area. Texas was big. Jersey was big, and some other weird areas. But you, it really didn't take off hugely, until what was it, about 1997?
I got my first ones in November of '96, and
Okay, that's
at that point, I would say that but I was also living in Illinois, which was one of the
right.
bigger areas. At that point, they were kind of becoming more of a thing, but like I was 8 years old, I didn't care. I wasn't gonna just start collecting these little animals because I didn't see a reason to. But I did have a collector mentality even at that age, and so when I got the first few and I found like a checklist, and I'm like, okay, I can try and get all these. And of course, I didn't realize they were going to keep making new ones constantly. I think you said that the thing that really made it into a household name was the teeny beanies in April '97, right?
Yep. Yep. That's when it went bonkers nationwide.
And if you don't mind actually explaining it for other people, I find the history of what caused the craze to really start quite interesting, because it was pretty much just like you and Becky and the few other people that started collecting them. Like, you were kind of the ones that drove up demand, right?
Um, I was not a reseller at that point. I got into the actual reselling around, I want to say 98. Um,
But you were still part of the group that was kind of
yeah.
cataloging them, right?
The ones who really got it going, I have to say, was Becky, Peggy Gallagher, um, Becky Phillips,
Right, and two
um,
Beckys.
yeah, Mary Beth. I forget her last name. Um,
Kowalski, something like that.
yeah, Sobol. Yeah, I just can't. I
Oh, it's
can't
yeah, I think it's
pronounce
with
it.
an S. Soba,
Yeah,
something like that.
it was a group of Illinois soccer moms, who pretty much drove the whole thing at the beginning. They were calling overseas to get this stuff brought into the United States when they couldn't find it. They were calling all across the United States. Um, and so a lot of them got a lot of the really good stuff because it was going up almost like on a weekly basis. These things were just going up, and there was more and more people coming into the hobby. So
Yeah,
yeah,
because like
it was, but when it went bonkers was, in my opinion, was right around the teeny beanies. That's when you would these stores couldn't keep them in stock, and it was
yeah,
probably
I
actually a little bit before that, but that's when you really saw it. You saw the lines, you saw stores handing out numbers. It was like random drawings on where your place in line was. Um, it was bonkers.
and it's so sad because even those original 10 teenies go for like $2 now. Like they just have no value anymore.
No, no,
But
and I can't remember the exact numbers on that, but I think they're the only ones we have actual numbers on. They had produced, I believe it was 12 million of, like,
of each
I don't know
one.
if it was in total or each one. I think it was each one, and they sold out within a week.
I mean, they're Happy Meal toys. Pretty much, they're like the bottom of the barrel. Like, you find these sitting in a thrift store and nobody wants them because they're just, who cares? But yeah, I just find it funny because when you look at the hobby as a whole, like, really all we're talking about here is a particular brand of a plush toy, and it could have been anything that got popular. Like, if you go to any store now and you just go to a stuffed animal section, find some random not big name brand, you would not think this thing is going to suddenly be worth a ton of money, and yet that happened to happen with this one brand. And it's pretty arbitrary. It is pretty much just because the way I understand it, it was because you had this small group of people who kind of tracked them, realized that certain ones were changing designs, started calling around. And so I have to imagine, I actually have, like, in the first issue of the Mary Beth's magazine, there's a whole thing talking about calling a store across the country, like, do you have Peanut the elephant? What
Mm-hmm.
color is it?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, we have, it's dark blue. And they're like, can you send those to me? And so now you have to imagine that store owner is thinking maybe there's something to these, and then that spreads, and it just kind of, the whole thing grows
Mm-hmm.
exponentially because you start off with like 5 people who are into these, and it kind of blew up. It was so weird how that happened. And I don't know if we'll ever get anything like that again, because I think it also corresponded with when internet kind of started becoming a
A
household
thing.
thing.
Yeah,
And so it was easy to come across the information and like communicate with other collectors and stuff.
it was. It was a crazy time.
I have memories of like the first times I ever really used the internet, like I didn't have it at home. I had to like use it at a library. I would go to the Beanie fan sites because I wanted to see like which ones were coming out, which ones retired, that kind of stuff.
Boy, number five is gonna.
Oh yeah, here
This
we go.
number five irks me.
Number five's pretty bad.
Oh boy. You know, you should take it to to a Beanie Baby appraiser,
Which doesn't exist.
which does not exist. Yes, she is a licensed appraiser, but she's not a recognized Beanie Baby expert by anybody in the hobby. You know, if you want to send it to have it authenticated, then you would send it to True Blue Beans or you would send it to Peggy Gallagher. Those are the only two recognized authentication experts in the hobby, period.
There used to be
Um,
more, right? Like PB bags.
well, yeah, there used to be, but they're out of business.
Right. I just
And
wanted to.
PB Bags was great. Those guys were fantastic. But as far as people who are qualified to do authentication, it is Becky Estensoro of True Blue Beans and Peggy Gallagher of Peggy Gallagher Enterprises. That's it. Dr. Lori, she is qualified in subjects, you know, you know, art that is worth, probably millions of dollars. So why she's doing Beanie Babies, I don't know.
It's
But
an easy target, I guess.
I guess right now it is.
She always focuses on like how well it sits, like if
Right.
it's stuffed well enough, and that kind of stuff. Like that doesn't ever
You know,
really matter.
to collectors it doesn't. I do get her point on how it sits because that's something that you would do like with Stife, and
What's
that's
that?
Stife. It's a brand of bears that go way back, and Stife can typically hold some really good money. But we're talking Beanie Babies, and I do get her point about it. It can if it sits a certain way, blah blah blah. But beans can also be arranged inside, so
Yeah.
you can make it sit how you want to make it sit. Knowing what she has valued some stuff on, because we know somebody who paid what $50 or $55 for an appraisal, and we know somebody who's paid $25 for an appraisal. So I'm not sure exactly how she structures her prices, but when you're talking that you can get one done by an actual expert in the hobby who's been around for 25 years, they only charge what is that, I think 15 plus shipping. Remember too, there was an item that had been authenticated. I can't remember if it was by Becky or Peggy, and I believe it was a Beanie Boo prototype of some kind. And she appraised it at $1,000. And this is one that we've seen sell before for like 100, $200. And you know whose it is because she's one of our admins, but it just doesn't make sense. And I mean, you and I have
I mean,
seen
you're
other
right.
where she bypassed a Nana
Oh yeah, and the Royal Blue Peanut.
and the Royal Blue Peanut, and then is she qualified to tell if it's even authentic?
I mean, almost certainly not. But the thing that the problem I had with that was it was in the Business Insider video that somebody had the whole big collection, and she's just
Right.
kind of going through these a buck, a buck, a buck, and one of them was the Royal Blue Peanut. Like you wouldn't say that's a buck in any circumstance. You
No.
would either say this is very valuable, or you would say this is a counterfeit of
Right.
something that would be very valuable, but yours is fake, so you can't sell it. You wouldn't
Exactly.
just say a buck. Like,
Exactly. And she criticizes price guides. And we do one. And we do price ranges.
and you're the one who does the research for that, right?
Oh yeah.
So you
Yeah.
can so you
I don't
can
do I have to okay, I have to back off on that because I don't do the Hello Kitties and some of the other licensed beanies because they drive me crazy.
fair enough.
Yeah. So they both Becky and Karen Holmes, uh they do those. But for most everything else, I do a lot of it. Karen Holmes helps me a lot with some of the prices, and she keeps me on track. But
Right. So even if
and
you're
we
not
look at
the only person who does it, you at
no,
least do a lot of it. And so
I
you
do
can explain the process that goes into this. This isn't just saying like I like this animal, so I think it's worth this much. It's
right,
based off of
right.
sales, and
Well,
you should explain the process a bit.
and it's not only that. I was a dealer until what was it about 2011, 2012 is when I quit. And the reason I quit dealing, well, it was twofold. But I didn't feel that somebody who is selling these items should be doing the value of these items. To me, it was a conflict of interest.
That makes sense.
So I quit, I quit doing it. And it was time too, because they were driving me crazy. And part two, I just didn't like some of the people coming up in the hobby.
Mm.
I thought that it was becoming very unethical. So I got out. But not to say I don't sell on occasion, because yeah, I do. But this guide, we do a range, because if you're a known dealer, you're going to get more money than somebody who is not known in the hobby. It's just a fact of the matter. It's just the way it is. We take so many different prices from so many different places. It's not going to eBay, and I know that's what we're accused of all the time, is we just go to eBay and we see what stuff is sold for, and we come up with some kind of a range. We do use eBay, but we also know to weed out the fake sales,
Of
and
course.
we also throw out some of the ridiculous low ones. We also have to look at uh, whether it's used, whether it's being called new, who is selling this item. We look at Amazon, we do look at Etsy, we look at uh, Mercari. We also use our dealers, because Becky being an authenticator, you know, and Karen and I, having, done the books and been in the hobby forever, we know most of the dealers and we know most of the collectors too. So we're able to get, on the rares at least, we're able to get a good idea of what they're selling for behind the scenes. We do occasionally look at Facebook Marketplace, because we are hearing stories of, a common fifth gen selling for $50. And I know I've told you the story of going to an auction and seeing a reseller there who did a quickie little search on his phone and saw what he thought they were selling for. I shook my head, and he went ahead and bought it. He's like, "Oh my God, this thing is worth like $10,000," and I think he paid $400 or $500 for it.
Oof.
And the next time I saw him at auction, he said, "Now I know why you were looking at me that way." He couldn't move it. So, anyway, I'm going on a tangent.
I mean, I think the tangent is good. It's good to know kind of where all this is coming from, because, like, you can say all day that, like, the prices are only based on what people pay for them, and I mean, that's true, but
Right.
if you see 99 of a beanie sell for $5 and one random one that allegedly sold for a couple hundred, like, I've seen people argue that that higher price completely invalidates all the lower ones, because if one sold that much, that means everybody should raise their standards to that amount, and it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. I don't know. I don't know why they argue. If you're able to get more money in a local Facebook group, or you're able to sell for a bit more on eBay, congratulations. That's fantastic that you're able to do it. How long did it take you? And show proof. If you can show proof, send it to us. You know, send us an email at tybbpg@gmail.com. And if you've got proof of some stuff selling, we'll take a look at it. But you know, the the guide is good. It's very valid prices. We do a range, and we do it in three different conditions, because there is a big difference between a mint tag, a crease tag, and no tag.
Right. And
Um,
before you go on, actually, for all the beanies that are in the guide, are those values actually individually checked for, like, all of
yes,
them?
yes,
Really, even like all the
yeah,
comments?
yes,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. Now you know
Because I
why
know
it
that
takes me.
I know that would make sense for the rares, because, like, you
Yeah,
can have, like, let's say you have a brownie. Well, brownie's a bad example, but like a spot with no spot with
hmm,
no tag is still going to be worth a lot, but you want to know how much it is. But if you just have like a Gen 5 mooch with nothing special about it, I feel like it would be easy to just kind of throw in $1 and just not worry about it.
no,
But
no, they're all, every single one of them. That's why we have to do it. Every 6 months to to a year or whatever. But we also monitor it, throughout the year, because like just last night we had to raise the price of New York Issy,
yeah, I saw that.
because yeah, because the previous two, one sold I think for 150, one sold for 250, and then Swirly the snail, because of that TikTok video.
That thing is so dumb.
I know. Um, but that was typically, a $5 or less beanie. And because of a TikTok video,
Random circumstances drove it up.
drove it up, and it was going up, and we did recently lower it to like 15 to 30, because it's starting to chill out just a
Yeah,
little
it's
bit.
definitely going to be dropping. That's not something
Yeah.
that'll last forever. How much would you say that the trends affect stuff that ends up in clickbait like Claude? Because we all know they're still common and that you can find them for cheap, but people do occasionally buy them for the higher amounts for real.
Well,
So,
what I've seen is a huge increase. Say you've got Claude the Crab, which normally would sell, you know, $3 5. We have seen a huge increase in the $10 to $20 range. And here's another little thing: always look at your percentages of what has sold. And what I mean by that is, like, right now,
how many listed
there's
compared to how many
2,000.
sold?
Yeah, there's 2,728 Thai Claudes
Mm.
listed on eBay. And you go to sold, and there's 178 that have sold. What is that, like 5%? But, and I do see, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at the very, here's one that sold for 350, and then the next one, 1,000, and that's a teeny beanie on the 1,000.
Oh, yeah,
And
definitely.
when you look at the listing, it's a zero feedback seller. It was listed as an auction, and the buyer has private feedback. Let's see, which means probably he's getting the negatives, racking up for not paying. I mean, it's insane. And then you go to the next one. Let's see. Here's one that sold for $10, and I believe that.
Yeah.
Um, I
It's more
do.
than I would pay, but I would see
Yeah,
some people doing it.
yeah. And then you got another one for 11. You got one here for a penny. Uh, seven
Probably plus
dollars.
like 15 shipping.
Yeah, probably. But I am seeing some for 100. Okay, let's go look at this. 100, another zero feedback seller, and the buyer is zero feedback. And that's what we're talking about. It's those are your obvious fake sales.
Yeah,
So
people just
obvious.
it's I don't expect the average person to know how to kind of check that stuff because that's digging
I
in a
don't
little
either.
deeper. But the information does exist, and it's really just logic. If you've got 500 of the things listed for $10 or less, why would anybody pay for the higher ones?
Exactly.
And that's probably where the errors come in because then people can say, "Oh, mine has this detail that the others don't." Even if that's not true, they can at
Right.
least say it, and people will be too lazy to check.
That's right.
Just like how they're too lazy to check that every Valentino has a brown nose. But
Right. And it,
that's the other thing I tell people with like the poem mistakes. If someone asks about those, like there's no good way to know if one is rare or one is super common. So I just say look up the beanie on eBay, look at like 20 listings of it. Don't worry if they're listed high or low. See how many of those have the same mistake. If it's a lot of them, then don't worry about it. If you can't find it, then maybe you have something. If people are so confident that they have something that's special, why don't they buy up all the $5 ones and then try to sell them back for the higher price if they're so certain it's going to work that way?
well, that's so
Like,
true. And it's, like I've said in the group, several times, if these things were really these prices, I wouldn't be answering questions on a Beanie Baby Facebook group. I'd be over in Tahiti somewhere, chillaxing on a beach, with my millions of dollars from selling these rares. So, it doesn't make any sense. And like I said, I do understand human nature. I do understand
yeah,
that.
you want to hope you have something good, but
Sure
there
you
has to be a
do.
dose of reality in there.
Sure you do. But those who argue it, it's just as frustrating for you as it is for us. We're trying to help, and I know sometimes we get frustrated and we might come across as rude, and we don't mean to at all, because that is what we'd like to help. We really do. But you've got to have your feet, you know, firmly put in, reality. And what these articles are doing is just not based on reality, and
It's just raising people's hopes for no reason.
it is only to be
Because,
crushed,
yeah, it's
and
like,
we're
because
the
what's
ones who are
happening
continually
is
crushing them.
like these people are finding like oh, my mom used to collect these, let me see if they still have them somewhere. They have all 20 that are in the Mental Floss article.
Right.
These must be worth millions. Like, why are they doing it's just
Or like the McDonald's, we
oh,
get the same
the
question.
international bears with the
Those international
1993
bears.
tags.
over and over. We actually had some people on our in our group who were getting so frustrated with all of them showing up that we created a master thread for people to post their their McDonald's teeny beanies to.
Because they're a waste of space. Nobody
They
buys
are,
these.
and you know people get people get upset because they find out that they're not worth anything. There are the Malaysian set is worth, I don't know, like 100, but they were only available in Malaysia. They're the Malaysian Mai Tais. And then you have a Singapore box set that's worth, I don't know, around 40, 50. And, but those were only available in Singapore.
Yeah.
If it was produced here in the US or Europe, they're pretty much not worth anything. But I will say this.
The Crew Glory and Crew Millennium are still only like $5, right? Those aren't
Yeah,
really anything either.
exactly. Yeah, and I want to address one more thing that's in this article
Did
because
we get to number 6 yet? The never ship a beanie that hasn't been sold?
yes, that's it. Yeah. The way it has been done since authentication started is you ship your beanie to the authenticator. We have two recognized authenticators, Becky Estensoro of True Blue Beans and Peggy Gallagher. Nobody should send them to anybody else. She says a legitimate appraiser can help you sell your beanie, but not everyone claiming to be an expert online should be trusted.
Oh,
That
she
includes
should look in a
her.
mirror. Yeah.
Yeah, that includes her. She is not recognized within the hobby by anybody who's an expert. These people are experts for a reason. They know how to tell real versus fake. There are tags out there that you cannot tell are counterfeit through a picture. You have to have them in your hand. In fact, I know somebody who just bought a Humphrey, and he sent it to me, and I looked at it. I'm via pictures on the internet, and I said, that's a real beanie, but that tag, you really need to send it in because those first gen tags were heavily lasered. And lo and behold, laser tag.
Now explain
Um,
what a laser tag is for the people watching.
a laser tag happened on primarily first, second, and third gens. What the people would do is they would somehow laser off the print, and then they would
From an
print
attic
it,
treasure, right?
huh?
Usually from like an attic treasure.
Yeah, usually from an attic treasure. Um, and then they would reprint it with the beanie information. And a lot of times, um, on the first gens, you can't tell it all, but you can see and what I mean, you can't tell it all uh, in a photo. There's a shellac, the shellac, part of the shellac on the back, the shininess of the
Yeah,
tag is
because
worn down
just
from
to
the
kind
laser.
of give a little more information on this one, so the attic treasures are a different line from Thai. They're different, like the like jointed bears and cats and that kind of stuff, and they would have the same kind of tags usually. And
Right.
so what she's saying is, you like there would be a way to basically erase the name of that particular one and then print the new name over it, but
Okay, well,
like
what ha- what happened with the attic treasures is there was a mistake on some of them, and instead of saying on the left hand side, instead of saying, and this happened on the second gens,
right.
it would say the Beanie Babies collection instead of the Thai attic treasures collection, and so they were easier to do because they'd only laser the right hand side, and they would just change the name of the item and the style number, and then on the backhand side, they some of the real good laser people would go ahead and do the barcode numbers. But that's one way that you can tell is like you're looking at the tag and you see say 4050, for brown teddy, and then you flip it over and the barcode doesn't match the style number.
Right, because the last 4 digits of the barcode are supposed to be the style number.
Correct.
And that was something that I didn't know for a long time. It's a pretty obscure fact, but that's how you know the style numbers of the 5th gen onwards, because they don't have this, they don't have
Right.
it inside the tag. So
Right. So yeah, I hate laser tags. There was a lot of them back in the early years. So not so much anymore, I don't think. But yeah, in the early years, they had a lot of them. And the first gen laser tags, I would assume were done from addicts too. I never understood exactly how they did it. Only that they were deemed laser tags because somehow they used a laser of some kind.
it's
And
so weird.
people are wondering why did they do this? And uh, were there really that many counterfeits? And yeah, there were. I mean, on any given day, we can go to eBay and pull up Trap. Trap the Mouse is one of the biggest counterfeit ones. Oh my god. We can go and we will find more counterfeits than authentic.
I
It's
can believe that.
it's really sad. It's really sad. People wasting their money on that stuff.
I've seen a bunch of counterfeit RB peanuts just from casually looking it
Oh
up, and
yeah,
usually really bad ones too, where they'll have
yeah,
like the Gen 3 tush tag with the name. Like,
right. It's really sad, and that's why we started doing so many of the videos. People also try to claim that that it was only the rares that were counterfeited, and that's not true. Um, Everything pretty much up until 2000 was counterfeited. They just didn't make it into this country, and now they're starting to, or they have for about the past 5 years. I've got a counterfeit, I believe it's Hope, that's just hysterical looking. It's not even the right color, and it's floppy. I've got some funny counterfeits.
and I think the reasoning that I assumed these were being made is because these were countries that didn't actually officially get beanies, so they were just making knockoffs, right?
That's what I would assume.
Because prior to Gen 6, like in Gen 6, they started doing like the Japanese and that kind of stuff. But prior to that, it was US, Canada, UK, and Germany, and that was it, right?
Pretty much for we know that the original ones, the ones of the rares were done in China. Um, the ones I always called the later counterfeits, I always called them the Singapore counterfeits because that's where they all seem to be. Um, and they just, for some reason, they didn't make it into the country, and I don't know why, but they do pop up every now and then. They're later beanies. They're
And,
not the rare. There's a lot of fakes. I mean, like my Spike counterfeit. What is it? Spike the rhinoceros thing.
yeah.
That is a third gen swing tag.
Oh, yeah, Spike only came as 4 and 5.
Right.
But I think we've covered most of the things in the article.
What what I'd like people to remember is that just like with any other hobby, beanies aren't simple. They really aren't.
I
There's
actually would argue they're simpler than a lot of people make them out to be, but you still have to learn a lot of core things,
You
and
do,
there's
and see,
always
you know it.
exceptions.
See, you know those things to look for, so it's easy for you. But from somebody who knows nothing, has no history whatsoever, coming into beanies, and they come in with a Valentino, they they don't understand it. Or
Right.
a
And so
chocolate with with its 23 different
and
versions.
that's why it's so important to know from the beginning, learn the tag generations and learn the
Yes,
things that matter. Don't worry about PVC, don't worry about tag errors because there are instances where that can matter, but they're very rare.
right.
Like, and that's just it's like it's good to know when exceptions exist, but they're not that often.
No,
And so that's
and
why stuff like Princess and Peace are so complicated because there's all these little things you can look for that don't matter on anything else.
well, like with peace, you know, for a long time we said 108 and 113, the numbers inside the tush tag, were worth quite a bit of money. But I'm noticing that those prices are falling, and it's becoming more and more about the color and the color only.
And you and me both like to categorize those into the like
Yeah,
6 different color groups, but most people don't really do that. So it really just kind of comes down to whether or not it looks pretty. Is that
it
is
does,
that what
and
you'd say?
it does. And there's a small group of Peace Bear collectors who spend money. And what they're looking for are insane colors. They want neon, red, yellow, stuff like that. 9 times out of 10, or 9.9 times out of 10, your piece is not going to be worth any more than $5.
Right.
It's just the way it is. And
And the things they look for are sometimes really specific too. Like I don't
yes,
understand the like the pajama and the tricolor face and that kind of
right.
stuff. Like I know what the terms mean, but I can't imagine seeking those out.
Yeah, it's just, you know what a pajama is. And for those who don't, it's a solid color from the neck down. For the tricolor face, it's pretty much self-explanatory. There's three little sections on the face, and that's where each little section has its own color, like red, blue, and yellow. As an example, and they're solid. And those are desirable, by some of these Peace Bear collectors.
But yeah, I'm trying to think if there's really anything else we should mention because I mean, really, I could kind of go on for forever here. But
I know.
I guess really what it comes down to is don't trust most of the articles online, but the problem is when you say that, it's hard to say don't trust online sources, but trust this one because this is the one we run. I always feel bad saying that,
I
but
know.
I mean, you three at least have the history and know the subject like inside and out. So
Yeah. Yeah,
random Joe
we
Schmo writing this article on Mental Floss doesn't.
yeah, and I know people accuse us of suppressing the values, and that's just not true. The um the values are going to go up if they're going to go up, and when you've got millions of them, it's going to take a while for them to go up. Uh, Somebody once said something about rarity and how these are rare because they're old. You know, I've got an antique, what do you call it, butter churner from my grandma's farm from the late 1800s. It was when I got it back in the 80s from her, it was worth like $35. It's worth like 50 now. Just because it's old doesn't make it worth money.
Right. For something to be valuable, it has to have its scarcity and it has to be desirable.
Right,
And it's just most of the things people are claiming are expensive are neither of those.
right.
It's I and somehow that's just kind of not clicking with a lot of the newer collectors. They read something saying it's worth a lot and that's all they need. Nothing else. No amount of logic will convince them otherwise.
Yeah, and going back to the websites and which ones you can trust, somebody once said that these sites are out there because you'll click on something that says, "Is your beanie worth 20,000?" But you're not going to click on an article that says, "Is your beanie worth $5?"
Right.
And that's what makes them, so popular. But you have to have some logic, and you just have to have some common sense. And it,
I was furious at the other Mental Floss article because of how little it actually used good sources. Like for instance, the first thing on their list is Princess, value $10,000, and they have these clickable words throughout their explanation that go to other sites. One of them goes to the article on Tie Collector that literally says these are the prices of each version,
right.
and it has like this whole giant write up about how people massively inflate the prices and you should never believe this. But
Well, it's the
like
same article.
they're linking to this article that says don't believe these things and then they still say those things.
Well, and they did the same thing on Iggy and Rainbow.
Yeah, because
They linked
they
to
link
our
to your price guide page.
they linked to our article about Iggy and Rainbow that explains the different versions and stuff like that. And we just laughed because it's like, okay, you link to Tie Collector, you link to us, and there's a few other sites too that have valid information. They're there. Out of all those clickbait articles, the only one that ever corrected itself was Business Insider. They're the only ones who ever did.
And that
Um,
was because you and Becky reached out to them, right?
they actually reached out to Becky, is
Oh.
how it happened. I think that finally enough people had written that they reached out to Becky and we got it, all fixed.
Now they did
And
an
they removed the
actual
article.
proper interview with her, right? They just never
Yes,
actually posted it.
yes, they did there was a lot more in that interview than what was actually published. We thought they were going to publish the entire interview, but what they did is they just pulled the information that Dr. Lori had provided them. Because they had done a video and they had done an article and everything was pulled. They pulled their video too.
Well, I think we'll wrap this up. If you had any last minute things that you wanted to talk about, then we can. Otherwise, I think we've hit everything I planned to.
The only thing I would say is whether you join our group on Facebook or you go over to Reddit or you do whatever you do, um, listen to the people in those groups because they've got lots of experience. The people who are giving advice, we're people too. We're human and we try and we're there to help you. Just, don't yell and scream at us because, of what these articles claim. That's all I got.
Fair enough. All right. Well, thank you for doing this with me then. And
Okay.
I'm sure I'll be making more random beanie videos in the future. If I ever want anything more from you, I'll let you know.
Okay. Take care.